When life follows its normal course, we rarely prepare for the chasms that may suddenly appear in our path. The grief experienced after losing a spouse is undoubtedly one of the most devastating moments a woman can face. Did you know that many women make irreversible mistakes after losing their husbands and only realize it when it's far too late? This painful truth is rarely discussed openly, yet it can completely determine the course of the rest of their lives. We're talking about decisions made during moments of profound emotional vulnerability, when the brain literally functions differently, when neurotransmitters are dysregulated by trauma and pain. Grief isn't merely a passing emotional state. It's a neurobiological condition that alters our ability to process information, assess risks, and make rational decisions. Neuroscientists compare the grieving brain to one under extreme chronic stress, where the prefrontal cortex, responsible for judgment and logical thinking, becomes temporarily compromised, while the amygdala, the emotional center, works in overdrive. It's like driving a car with damaged brakes and a stuck accelerator. Everything happens too quickly, too intensely, and control seems impossible. When a woman loses her companion of decades, it's not just the emotional void that settles in. Suddenly there's an avalanche of practical responsibilities. Documents she never needed to manage before, complex financial decisions, veiled or explicit family pressures, and an entire universe of choices that were previously shared or simply delegated. All this happens precisely when she is least emotionally prepared to face such significant changes. It's like learning to swim in the midst of an oceanic storm. The urgency is real, but the conditions couldn't be worse. Society rarely acknowledges the depth of this challenge. While immediate grief receives some compassion, after a few weeks, the widow is expected to resume her life, be strong, move on. Phrases that, although well-intentioned, reveal a fundamental misunderstanding about the process of loss and identity reconstruction. Few people understand that widowhood isn't just about losing someone. It's often about losing part of one's own identity, shared dreams, future plans, and the financial and emotional security built together. Studies show that the first 12 to 18 months after losing a spouse represent a period of extreme psychological and cognitive vulnerability. It's precisely during this period that the most important and irreversible decisions tend to be made or imposed. Selling the family home, distributing inheritances, reorganizing investments, moving to a new city, abandoning social relationships. The cruel irony is that this is exactly when the brain is least equipped to make long-term decisions with clarity and rationality. Today I'll reveal the 5 fatal mistakes many women make after the death of their spouse. Mistakes that frequently result in deep and lasting regret. This isn't just a video about what not to do. It's a guide to emotional and financial protection during one of life's most vulnerable moments. If you're going through this now, know someone in this situation, or simply want to prepare for eventualities we all prefer not to think about, this video could save not only hard-earned financial resources, but also years of unnecessary additional suffering. Each mistake I'll share comes from real stories, from women who had the courage to recognize their regrets and the generosity to share their experiences so others won't repeat the same patterns. Some lost fortunes, others lost valuable relationships. Many compromised their physical and mental health in ways that could have been avoided. What they all have in common is the wish that someone had warned them about the emotional and practical pitfalls that arise on the path to reconstruction after loss. The good news is that with awareness and proper support, these mistakes can be avoided. The pain of loss is inevitable, but the additional suffering caused by hasty decisions is largely preventable. Let's dive into the 5 crucial mistakes every woman should know before facing this difficult journey. One that, with time and the right choices, can eventually lead to a renewed life with meaning and purpose, even after the deepest loss. Part 2. The 5 fatal mistakes. Fatal mistake. Number 1. Making immediate financial decisions. The first and perhaps most common mistake occurs in the financial realm. When emotions are raw and overwhelming, many widows make hasty financial decisions they later deeply regret. The human brain under extreme grief experiences something similar to cognitive impairment. The prefrontal cortex responsible for logical decision-making simply doesn't function at full capacity. This biological reality collides with the sudden onslaught of financial pressures and decisions that can't be postponed. Consider Sarah's story. After 35 years of marriage, she lost her husband to a sudden heart attack. Within 3 months, feeling overwhelmed by managing their large family home alone, she sold it for 35% below market value to a neighbor who approached her with what seemed like a compassionate offer. "I just wanted to be rid of the responsibility," she confessed. "But 2 years later I realized I had not only lost hundreds of thousands in equity, but also the only place my grandchildren had known as their special gathering spot. The financial loss was enormous, but the emotional cost was incalculable." The problem isn't just about selling assets too quickly. Many widows make equally damaging decisions by impulsively investing in questionable business ventures, lending substantial sums to family members who suddenly appear with urgent needs, or making major purchases as a form of emotional self-medication. The temporary relief of action, any action, feels better than the paralysis of grief, but the consequences often last decades. Financial vulnerability during grief is compounded by predators who specifically target widows. From financial advisors pushing unnecessary products to helpful family members with hidden agendas, to outright scammers who recognize vulnerability, the recently widowed often face a minefield of potentially exploitative situations at precisely their moment of greatest weakness. The solution is deceptively simple but requires tremendous discipline. Institute a financial waiting period of at least 6 to 12 months for any decision that isn't absolutely urgent. During this period, maintain your current financial arrangements while consulting independent financial advisors, preferably those recommended by trusted sources with no financial stake in your decisions. Remember, very few financial moves genuinely can't wait a year despite what others might tell you. Your future self will thank you for this pause. Fatal mistake. 2. Isolating from family and friends. The second critical mistake that many widows make is withdrawing from their social circles precisely when they need support the most. This isolation happens for numerous complex reasons. The discomfort of being the widow in social gatherings, the painful awareness of now being a single person in coupled environments, the mistaken belief that grief should be private, or simply the crushing exhaustion that makes social interaction feel impossible. Elena's experience illustrates this pattern perfectly. After losing her husband of 28 years, she gradually declined invitations, stopped attending family gatherings, and eventually stopped answering calls altogether. "I couldn't bear to be the object of pity," she explained, "and I was tired of putting on a brave face. It seemed easier to just stay home." By the time she realized her isolation had developed into severe depression, nearly 2 years had passed, and many of her relationships had atrophied beyond easy repair. The research on this phenomenon is clear. Social isolation during grief significantly increases the risk of depression, anxiety disorders, and even physical health problems like cardiovascular disease and compromised immune function. The human connection is not a luxury during grief, it's essential medicine. Yet many widows describe feeling contagious with grief, as if their sadness might burden others, so they withdraw to protect everyone else. The solution requires conscious effort to maintain connections, even when it feels extraordinarily difficult. Start with small, time-limited social engagements with your most understanding friends or family members. Be honest about your limitations. It's perfectly acceptable to say, "I can only stay for an hour," or "I might need to leave if it becomes too overwhelming." Consider joining grief support groups where everyone understands the terrain you're navigating. Most importantly, remember that isolation doesn't protect you from pain. It simply ensures you'll face that pain alone, without the buffer of human connection that makes grief bearable. The path through grief is not one of steady improvement, but rather of waves that come and go. Having a support network doesn't mean you won't feel the depth of your loss. It simply means you won't be drowning in those feelings without anyone to throw you a lifeline when the waves threaten to overwhelm you. Fatal mistake. Number 3. Neglecting physical and mental health. The third devastating mistake many widows make is neglecting their own health while managing the practical aftermath of loss. There's a cruel irony here. Just when the body and mind need extra care to manage the physical toll of grief, many women deprioritize their health completely, focusing instead on everyone and everything else. The physical impact of grief is profound and well documented. Studies show that grief affects almost every system in the body. Stress hormones flood the bloodstream. Inflammation increases, immune function decreases, sleep patterns are disrupted, and even digestion becomes compromised. This widow effect is so powerful that research has identified increased mortality rates among the recently bereaved. Yet in the midst of handling estates, supporting children through their own grief, and managing practical matters, many women postpone their own medical care indefinitely. Linda's case exemplifies this common pattern. After nursing her husband through terminal cancer, she ignored her own increasing fatigue and chest discomfort. "I kept telling myself I'd see a doctor once I finished organizing his affairs," she recalled. "There were so many urgent documents, decisions about the house, his business to wind down. By the time I finally collapsed and ended up in the ER, I had developed serious heart problems that could have been addressed months earlier. The doctor told me, 'You were so busy taking care of everyone else that you nearly died yourself.'" Beyond physical health, mental health support is equally critical yet frequently overlooked. Many widows express feeling that seeking therapy would somehow dishonor their grief or suggest weakness. Others simply don't recognize the symptoms of complicated grief, depression, or anxiety that can develop and persist without professional intervention. The stigma around mental health compounds the problem, particularly among older generations of women who were taught to manage on their own. The solution requires making your health a non-negotiable priority. Schedule a complete physical examination within the first 3 months after your loss. Set calendar reminders for basic self-care, adequate sleep, regular meals, and even minimal exercise like short daily walks. Most importantly, recognize that professional mental health support is not an indulgence, but a necessity. Grief counseling or therapy provides crucial tools for processing loss without becoming consumed by it. Remember that taking care of yourself isn't selfish. It's the foundation that enables you to handle everything else. As flight attendants always remind us, secure your own oxygen mask before helping others. Your physical and mental health is that oxygen mask. Fatal mistake. Murder 4. Yielding to external pressures. The fourth critical mistake involves surrendering to external pressures and expectations during a time of vulnerability. When a woman loses her spouse, she often finds herself navigating a complex web of expectations from adult children, in-laws, friends, financial advisors, and even society at large. These pressures can range from subtle suggestions to outright demands regarding how she should handle everything from her husband's possessions to major financial assets. This vulnerability to external influence has psychological roots. Grief often creates a crisis of identity and confidence. Many women report feeling untethered without their partner, especially if major decisions were typically made together or primarily by their husband. This temporary loss of confidence, combined with the cognitive impacts of grief, creates perfect conditions for yielding to others' opinions, even when those opinions conflict with their own best interests. Consider Patricia's experience. Widowed at 62, she had always deferred to her husband on financial matters. Within months of his death, her brother-in-law began helping with her finances. "He spoke with such authority about what I should do," she explained. "Before I knew it, I had signed over power of attorney, sold our vacation property at his suggestion, and invested in his friend's business venture. 3 years later, I've lost nearly 40% of what should have been a very comfortable retirement fund. I knew something felt wrong, but I doubted myself and trusted him because he was family." The pressure doesn't always involve finances. Many widows report being rushed to donate or dispose of their husband's belongings, pressured to sell the family home because it's too big for just one person, or criticized for how they're handling their grief. These pressures often come packaged as concern or helpfulness, making them difficult to recognize and resist. The solution requires establishing clear boundaries and buying yourself time for independent decision-making. Practice phrases like, "I appreciate your suggestion, but I'm not making any decisions about that right now," or "I need to consider this carefully on my own timeline." Seek truly independent professional advice from people with no financial or emotional stake in your decisions. Trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, even if you can't articulate why, that's valuable information worth honoring. Remember that while advice from others can be helpful, no one else has to live with the consequences of your decisions. Your life remains your own even in grief, and protecting your autonomy is essential to building a future that truly serves your needs and values. Fatal mistake number 5. Forgetting your own grief process. The fifth and perhaps most psychologically damaging mistake is attempting to bypass or accelerate the grief process itself. In our productivity-obsessed culture, grief is often treated as an inconvenient interruption to normal functioning rather than a necessary psychological journey. Many widows report feeling intense pressure, both internal and external, to get over it and move on, according to arbitrary timelines that have nothing to do with their emotional reality. This pressure manifests in several harmful behaviors: prematurely returning to work before emotionally ready, avoiding conversations about the deceased spouse to make others comfortable, suppressing emotions to appear strong for children or family members, or filling every moment with activity to avoid feeling the pain of loss. While these strategies might temporarily distract from grief, they ultimately prevent the processing necessary for genuine healing. Elizabeth's story highlights the consequences of this common mistake. After suddenly losing her husband of 23 years, she threw herself into caring for their teenage children and maintaining an appearance of unwavering strength. "I never cried in front of them," she recounted. "I went back to work after 2 weeks, kept the household running perfectly, and everyone praised me for how well I was handling things." 3 years later, she experienced a complete emotional collapse triggered by a minor reminder of her husband. "I realized I hadn't processed anything. I'd just been running from the pain. When it finally caught up with me, it was even more overwhelming because I'd spent years pretending I was fine." The psychological research on grief is clear. Grief that isn't expressed and processed doesn't simply disappear. It transforms into other problems. Unresolved grief has been linked to depression, anxiety disorders, substance abuse, relationship difficulties, and even physical illness. The brain and body require opportunities to process loss, and when denied those opportunities, they find other ways to express the unresolved trauma. This mistake is particularly common among women who have spent their lives in caregiving roles. The habit of putting others' needs first becomes especially problematic during grief, as many widows prioritize protecting others from their pain rather than attending to their own emotional needs. This self-sacrifice, while well-intentioned, ultimately serves no one. Unresolved grief eventually affects all relationships and responsibilities. The solution isn't complicated, but it requires courage. Allow yourself to fully experience grief without judgment or artificial timelines. This might mean setting aside regular time for grieving, whether through journaling, looking at photographs, visiting meaningful places, or simply allowing yourself to cry. It might mean joining a grief support group where expressing raw emotions is normalized and encouraged. Most importantly, it means rejecting the harmful cultural narrative that grief should follow a predictable timeline or reach a neat resolution. Remember that grief isn't something to get over. It's an expression of love that transforms over time. The goal isn't to forget or move on as quickly as possible, but to gradually integrate the loss into your life story in a way that honors both what you've lost and what remains possible. This integration cannot be rushed and looks different for every person. Trust your own process. Give yourself permission to grieve in whatever way feels authentic to you, and resist the pressure to perform recovery for others' comfort. These 5 fatal mistakes, making hasty financial decisions, isolating from support networks, neglecting physical and mental health, yielding to external pressures, and bypassing the grief process, share a common thread. They all stem from the extraordinary vulnerability that accompanies profound loss. Understanding these pitfalls doesn't guarantee a pain-free journey through grief. Nothing can do that. But awareness creates the possibility of choice rather than reaction, empowerment rather than victimization. The path through widowhood is challenging under the best circumstances, but avoiding these common mistakes can prevent adding unnecessary suffering to an already difficult journey. As we move into our conclusion, let's explore how awareness of these patterns can transform vulnerability into strength and grief into eventual growth. The journey through widowhood is not one anyone chooses, yet it's a path that many women must navigate. Understanding these 5 fatal mistakes, financial decisions made in haste, social isolation, health neglect, yielding to external pressures, and ignoring the grief process itself, provides a crucial roadmap for avoiding the most common pitfalls. These mistakes can truly devastate your future emotional and financial well-being, but now that you're aware of them, you're already one step ahead in protecting yourself during this vulnerable time. What makes these mistakes particularly dangerous is their interconnected nature. Financial vulnerability increases when you're socially isolated. Health deteriorates when grief isn't properly processed. External pressures become harder to resist when you're physically and emotionally depleted. Understanding this interconnection is powerful. It means that protecting yourself in one area creates positive ripple effects across all aspects of your recovery journey. The research on resilience after profound loss offers hope. While the pain of losing a spouse never completely disappears, many women do eventually rebuild meaningful, purposeful lives that honor both what was lost and what remains possible. The key difference between those who thrive again and those who remain stuck often comes down to the decisions made during that critical first year or two. Precisely the decisions we've discussed today. Remember that seeking help isn't weakness, it's wisdom. Professional financial advisors with experience in widowhood issues, grief counselors who understand the unique challenges you're facing, supportive community groups, and healthcare providers who recognize the physical toll of grief. These resources exist precisely because no one should navigate this terrain alone. Utilizing these supports isn't an admission of failure. It's a strategic approach to one of life's most challenging transitions. I invite you to reflect on which of these mistakes resonates most strongly with your current situation or concerns. Are you feeling pressured to make financial decisions before you're ready? Are you gradually withdrawing from friends and family? Have you been postponing medical care or dismissing the idea of emotional support? Identifying your particular vulnerabilities is the first step toward protecting yourself from these common patterns. If this content has provided value for you, please consider subscribing to our channel for more videos on navigating life's major transitions, financial protection during vulnerable periods, and emotional resilience strategies. And if you know someone who is currently facing the early stages of widowhood, or someone who might face it in the future, sharing this video could quite literally save them years of regret and unnecessary suffering. As a special gift for those who watched until the end, I've prepared a free guide called The First 90 Days, a practical guide to reorganizing your life after loss. This downloadable resource provides a step-by-step approach to handling documents, understanding your rights, creating a financial checklist, and implementing critical self-care practices during the most vulnerable period. The link is in the description below. Consider it your roadmap through terrain that feels impossible to navigate alone. Before we conclude, I want to share one rarely discussed secret that could make all the difference in your journey. After losing a spouse, you have specific legal rights and protections designed to safeguard your future during this vulnerable transition. Many widows never fully claim these rights simply because no one informs them of their existence. These protections range from extended deadlines for certain financial decisions to special considerations for estate taxes, from survivor benefits that go unclaimed to legal protections against predatory practices specifically targeting widows. The system recognizes the vulnerability that accompanies loss, even if our culture often pressures widows to just handle everything immediately. Want to learn more about these specific rights and protections? Leave the word rights in the comments section, and I'll create a detailed follow-up video covering each of these protections and how to ensure you receive all the benefits and considerations you're entitled to during this challenging time. Remember this above all: your grief is valid, your journey is unique, and despite how it may feel in the darkest moments, you are not alone in this experience. Millions of women have walked this path before you, and while the pain of loss may never completely disappear, it can eventually transform into something that coexists with new purpose and even unexpected joy. The decisions you make now will shape that future in profound ways. Protect yourself by avoiding these common mistakes, and give yourself the gift of patience and compassion during this most difficult of life's transitions. Thank you for watching, and please remember to download your free guide from the link below. Until next time, be gentle with yourself. You're navigating one of life's most challenging journeys, and you deserve all the support and guidance available to you.